Is China's economic miracle unraveling? After years of enviable growth, China now faces massive obstacles.
Russia just crushed China's economy with a shocking decision that is shaking the foundations of the two countries. Slapping a massive 55% tariff on Chinese goods, Russia has sparked a global trade shockwave. This isn't just about numbers. It's a bold move against a country that's been a vital ally since the Ukraine invasion. But why would Russia target its supposed friend so aggressively? And what's China's next move in this economic standoff? Watch till the end to find out. Russia imposes tariff on Chinese goods. After the Russian-Ukrainian war broke out, most European companies left Russia, but Chinese suppliers quickly filled up the space to ensure a stable growth of Russia's furniture sector. But why does Russia now turn its back on us? This was written by a Tianjin-based writer in China, accusing Russia of having tariff policies that are more aggressive than Trump. Russia snuck up on China in a shocking move, imposing a 55% tariff on Chinese furniture parts. The country also reclassified sliding rail parts used in Chinese furniture and categorized them alongside furniture parts with bearings. This move is expected to make it significantly more expensive for Russia to import these parts from China. The tariff is not universal, but it has been levied specifically against Chinese goods, with similar furniture parts from European countries subject to tariffs of no higher than 10%. This has affected the relationship between the two countries. Aside from the tariffs on furniture components, Russia has also increased import tariffs for consumer goods, which include wine, candies, shampoo, beer, and biscuits. The tariffs are only placed on countries that support sanctions against Moscow. Western producers stopped selling to Russia a long time ago, but the latter has been able to keep the goods coming, especially from China and through gray imports. When Russia first invaded Ukraine, China was one of the few countries that supported it and continued to ignore the sanctions placed by other countries. European countries especially placed a lot of sanctions on Russia and publicly criticized its actions. So it's surprising that Russia will not support China, but other European countries. Russia's decision to impose new tariffs on China-made furniture parts has raised new questions about the two countries and their partnership. The Customs Department of Vladivostok recategorized furniture sliding rail components as bearing types, causing the tariffs to rise from 0 to 55.65%. Vladivostok now handles 90% of China's furniture part imports to Russia. In November 2024, Russia had revealed that it would be imposing a 60% tariff on furniture imported from unfriendly countries and a 10% on furniture from friendly countries. One would have thought that China would be one of the friendly countries, but its tariffs are close to 60%. Russia will also be placing 30% tariffs on furniture from Turkey, while the Middle Eastern and North African countries pay between 30% and 60%. Impact of the new tariffs. As Russia increases its tariffs against China specifically, many are questioning the impact and fairness of these new policies. It has also revealed the cracks in the China-Russia relations, as their partnership seemed perfect before, but has been revealed to be a sham. The first question is why Russia is imposing tariffs in the first place, whether it's to wage war against China or to protect its own domestic industries and make imported goods more expensive and less competitive. Political analysts are saying that the Russian government is trying to boost its revenue because of what it has spent on the ongoing Ukrainian war. But Moscow should consider whether it is worth sacrificing its good trade relations with China just for a small amount of tariff revenue. The Tianjin-based writer B.I. Shua also holds this perspective, writing in his article, "In the commercial world, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests." Russia wants to develop its manufacturing sector and knows that it can't rely on China forever. It's natural that Russia is leaning towards protectionism. Another columnist in China, Wang Wu, had said, "We should not expect that some so-called friendly countries will always respond with smiles. We must always beware of their positive backstabbing." The new tariffs are expected to do some major damage to Russia and China. The Association of Furniture and Woodworking Enterprises of Russia had said that the new tariff would bankrupt importers of furniture components in Russia and create another 15% cost for the local furniture makers. Every year, Russia used to import about $1.3 billion of furniture parts from China, and over 90% of Russian lumber is sent to China. But there's no telling how this would change in the future. It seems like Russia's decision to place tariffs on China is the first step in a full-blown trade war. These are causing fractures in the well-known Sino-Russian relationship, especially with different members of the Chinese media and government targeting Russia for the increase. Aside from the fact that Russia receives furniture components from China, China also takes more than 90% of all the lumber produced by Russia, and this accounts for over 63% of the lumber imported in China each year. Russian timber giants have been depending on China to buy their products. So if Russia makes it difficult for China to sell its furniture components, China might do the same for Russia's timber. Zhou Yang, a Chinese columnist in Henan, had also written about this in an article published about Russia's sudden decision. He wrote, "In the past few years, China and Russia seem to have a perfect understanding of each other, from energy cooperation to joint military exercises. But the recent tariff announcement has cast a shadow on this friendship." According to Zhou, Russia needed goods and investments from China, but didn't want to share its economic benefits or military technology. As China gears up for one trade war with the US, it seems like another one will happen with Russia. Russia faces domestic pressure economically. Russia's decision to impose heavy tariffs on Chinese furniture imports is reportedly to protect its domestic furniture industry. This showcases its efforts to boost local production even in the midst of economic challenges. Due to the tariff, Chinese furniture parts have become more expensive, providing Russian manufacturers with a competitive edge in the domestic market. This move has been seen as an attempt to revitalize Russia's domestic economy, especially since it has been significantly impacted by economic pressures and sanctions. Russia has faced over 16,000 sanctions from different countries and organizations ever since it started the Ukrainian war. Due to these sanctions, Russia's economic growth has reduced by 5% in the past 2 years. Since Russia has realized that other countries will not provide support, it has shifted its focus to domestic industrial development. By imposing tariffs on Chinese imports, Russia aims to lower its reliance on foreign goods, encouraging local manufacturers to increase production and create new employment opportunities. But the timing of this tariff decision is also important, especially looking at the close economic relationship between Russia and China. Traditionally, China has been a major trading partner for Russia, providing it with affordable goods and parts, even if other countries were against this decision. Still, Russia decided to move forward with its tariffs, and political analysts are worried that this would lead to another trade war. China's trade war with the United States already had widespread consequences for the two countries. Both China and the United States suffered as they repeatedly placed sanctions on each other's companies and entities. Although Russia has only placed tariffs on China, there's no telling what it would escalate to, especially now that the public opinion of Russia in China is negative. In this context, the tariff on Chinese furniture is more than a trade measure. It's a strategic attempt to stimulate Russia's domestic industry and minimize the economic impact of sanctions. While it may create friction with China, the move underscores Russia's efforts to strengthen its economic resilience in a rapidly changing global landscape, protecting Russia's automotive industry. Aside from the furniture industry, another industry that Russia is trying to gain independence in is its automotive sector. Russia has noticed that it's highly reliant on importing cars from China, so by May 2024, Russia started considering measures to protect their domestic automotive industry. They believed that their increasing number of imports was hurting the local car manufacturers. Then by October 2024, Russia officially announced an increase in the utilization fee for imported cars, which is pretty much a tariff. This makes Chinese cars more expensive in the Russian market. Russia has also increased the recycling fees of imported cars, which are usually paid by the importer and manufacturer. The fees are based on the size of the vehicle's engine and would increase annually. Russia has also increased the custom duties on imported cars and scrappage fees, also paid by importers and manufacturers. It has also been hard for Russia to continue trading cars with China, with payment problems that have increased the cost of delivery. Banks in countries that trade with Russia are now delaying or failing to make payments. To boost local production, Russia has increased its subsidies for locally made cars. Economic impact on Russia. The imposition of a hefty tariff on Chinese furniture imports is a double-edged sword for the Russian economy, as it comes with both potential benefits and significant risks. On the positive side, the tariff is designed to boost Russia's domestic furniture industry by making Chinese imports more expensive and less competitive. This could lead to increased demand for locally produced furniture, providing a much-needed boost for struggling manufacturers. Over time, the policy could create jobs, stimulate domestic production, and reduce dependence on foreign imports. This contributes to Russia's goal of economic self-reliance amidst the ongoing Ukraine war. However, the move also carries a lot of risk for Russia's economy. As we've seen with the trade wars between China and the US, China might retaliate with heavier tariffs and sanctions. Russia is still reliant on China despite its measures to reduce this, and would suffer a lot if China decides to place sanctions. As one of Russia's key trading partners, China's response might include tariffs or restrictions on Russian goods, which could lead to decreased export revenues and heightened economic pressure on sectors outside of furniture manufacturing. Additionally, higher costs for imported components may drive up prices for consumers in Russia, reducing purchasing power and potentially offsetting some of the economic gains. The tariffs' impact also depends on the capacity of the Russian furniture and automotive industry to meet increased demand. If the domestic manufacturers in China can scale production or deliver competitive products, the policy can lead to growth, but if not, it leads to inefficiencies. Ultimately, while the tariff has the potential to strengthen a specific industry and advance Russia's broader goal of economic self-sufficiency, its broader implications could lead to trade tensions with China and economic disruptions in other sectors. Balancing these competing outcomes will be critical for Russia as it navigates its challenging economic landscape. Economic impact on China. The hefty tariff imposed by Russia on Chinese furniture imports is set to impact the Chinese economy, especially for exporters that are reliant on the Russian market. The higher cost of Chinese products in Russia would definitely lead to a decline in sales, directly affecting revenues and profit for exporters. It will also lead to issues with timber trade, as China depends a lot on the timber from Russia. China, as a major global exporter, has faced similar challenges in its trade disputes with other nations, notably the US-China trade war. The tariff from Russia introduces another layer of complexity to China's export-driven economy. If Chinese exporters struggle to find alternative markets for their goods, the ripple effects could extend to suppliers, manufacturers, and workers in industries connected to furniture production. The economic strain could also lead to broader social and political pressures domestically. Aside from the direct economic impacts, the tariff could also lead to strained relationships between Russia and China. The two nations have cultivated a close relationship, but this move might cause China to retaliate by imposing tariffs and restrictions on Russian goods. Such actions also escalate trade tensions, igniting a conflict that is similar to the US-China trade war. This can also disrupt the overall supply chains and markets tied to the two economies. In the broader context, this tariff underscores the fragility of global trade relationships and the challenges posed by protectionist policies. For China, the long-term effects will depend on its ability to mitigate the impact by diversifying markets, adapting its export strategies, and negotiating diplomatic solutions to avoid further escalation in trade tensions with Russia. Impact on Russian consumers. Russia's 55% tariffs on Chinese furniture components will not only harm the two economies, but it would also impact Russian consumers, especially with higher furniture prices and reduced purchasing power. The recycling fees and custom duties placed on automotive imports from China are also affecting the prices of cars in Russia. The primary impact is the expected rise in furniture prices, estimated to increase by at least 15% nationwide. Russian businesses relying on imported components from China will face higher costs due to the hefty tariffs, which are ultimately passed on to consumers. This price hike may strain household budgets, especially for families already grappling with economic pressures from inflation and wage stagnation. For many, purchasing new furniture could become a financial burden, leading to reduced overall spending in other areas and potentially dampening economic growth. The reduced availability of affordable imported furniture may also limit consumer choices. Households have found themselves forced to settle for low-quality domestic alternatives or paying a higher price for quality items. The tariff is supposed to boost domestic production, but questions remain about whether the Russian industry can scale up and meet demand without increasing prices. Challenges such as sourcing materials, increasing production capacity, and maintaining competitive quality standards could hinder the industry's growth and limit its ability to address consumer needs effectively. In addition, the reliance on Chinese imports for furniture components and cars has made the Russian market highly vulnerable to the tariffs. This has caused members of these industries to be worried about business closures and layoffs. Business associations have expressed mixed reactions. especially as they worry about the higher production costs and whether China will retaliate. For Russian households, these tariffs could exacerbate existing economic challenges, reducing affordability and access to essential goods. As higher prices strain purchasing power, many consumers may defer or forego furniture purchases altogether, creating ripple effects across the economy. China's reaction to the tariff. China has had a strong reaction to Russia's decision, warning that this could lead to a mutually destructive tariff war. Members of its media and diverse politicians have also responded to this decision, giving diverse perspectives. Vadim Vildanov, the general director of Boyard, which is a Russian producer of cabinet fittings, said to a Russian media, "This is contrary to the interests of domestic furniture production because it is Chinese fittings that now cover the needs of the Russian market." Meanwhile, Chinese commentators have had a lot to say about this recent decision, as they are not at all happy about Russia's move to restrict trade from China. For China's NetEase News, Du Wan, a columnist, had written if such actions had come from the United States, positive energy experts would have long condemned it as a doomed hegemonic behavior. Yet in the face of Russia's ruthless measures, they remain silent, spineless as jellyfish. The trade between China and Russia has surged since the invasion of Ukraine, helping Russia to sustain its economy despite the war. But Russia is now reducing its imports from China, especially since Chinese exports to Russia dipped in March for the first time since the war. Another Chinese columnist, Zhou Yang, wrote in response to the situation. He had said that the Chinese people would not forget that the Russian Empire occupied 1.5 million square kilometers of China's land in the 1900s. He also added that the Soviet Union had pushed the separation of Outer Mongolia, which is now called Mongolia, from China in 1911. According to him, Russia and China should be working together to defend themselves against the US, especially now that the US is trying to remain the dominant economic power. Instead, it seems like they will be competing with each other in the future. Geopolitical landscape and trade implications. China and Russia have had robust bilateral trade since the start of the Ukraine war. According to China Customs, Sino-Russia bilateral trade increased by 26.3% year-on-year, reaching $240 billion in 2023. China's exports to Russia, including automobiles and manufacturing goods, increased by 47% to $111 billion over the period. Meanwhile, China continues to import from Russia, including oil, gas, and metals, and it reached $129 billion. China's trade surplus with Russia has reached $18 billion. In the first 10 months of 2024, China exported $94 billion of goods to Russia, which increased by 80% from the same period in 2021. In fact, China and the US also had frequent dealings, with a $367 billion trade surplus. That's why Trump plans to impose tariffs to force China to buy more American goods. It seems like Putin decided to follow Trump's footsteps and also impose tariffs. The ongoing trade war between the United States and China has had ripple effects, causing other countries to reconsider their trade policies and alliances. Russia's imposition of the tariff may be an attempt to cozy up to the new Trump administration and diversify its economy. It is also a move to mitigate the economic fallout from sanctions while avoiding reliance on a single trade partner. Chinese exporters are also exploring more markets, since Russia and the United States seem to be pulling back. These include Southeast Asia and Africa as they try to mitigate the impact of the tariffs and sanctions. By establishing trade relationships with these countries, Russia can offset the loss in the Russian market and take advantage of new revenue streams. China has also been focused on enhancing trade relationships with other major economies, including India and the European Union. One of the ways China is doing this is with the Belt and Road Initiative, a key strategy for China to expand its influence and create new markets for its products. The BRI is expected to develop trade routes across Asia, Europe, and Africa, leading to tight-knit trade links among countries. The initiative can also help China reduce the risks related with tariffs and sanctions by diversifying its partnerships with other countries. Trade tensions and dependence. Russia and China have a long history of economic interaction, particularly with periods of cooperation and conflict. The two countries have sought to rebuild and strengthen their economic ties in the post-Cold War period, signing numerous trade agreements and joint ventures. However, their trade relationship has not been without conflicts, with several instances of trade disputes and tensions throughout history. Russia has imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, which may lead to a trade war. China is likely to retaliate, but Russia cannot afford to have a trade war because it is highly dependent on China. The situation is fragile, with Russia seeking close ties with China because of its international sanctions. For many years, China and Russia have been investing in each other. Chinese investments have helped upgrade railway border crossings, modernize the cargo port at Vladivostok, and alleviate pressure on Russia's logistics network. Energy cooperation is also the backbone of China-Russia relations, with Chinese investments supporting the expansion of Russian exports by improving infrastructure. Chinese investments have also focused on regional projects, like upgrading storage sites and increasing shipping container availability. China has ramped up its imports of Russian crude oil, importing 2.1 million barrels per day. Russia has offered this oil at discounted prices due to sanctions, and China takes advantage of this too. But this has been very helpful to Russia's economy during tough times. The future of Russia-China trade relations. Everyone's watching to see where the future of Russia-China trade relations will go, especially with the risks of a trade war. A trade war would definitely affect Russia more than China, because Russia is more dependent. Although China would be affected, the issues would hit the Russian economy harder because it's already isolated from other countries. A trade war would also damage the partnership between Russia and China, especially after they have long cooperated in areas like energy, defense, and infrastructure. Some analysts are predicting that the tensions between Russia and China will continue, but others are expecting it to cool off since the two countries still need each other. To fully resolve this issue, the two countries should negotiate. It seems like Russia has nowhere to turn except China, especially since other countries have isolated it after the Ukraine war. But the possibilities are endless for China, the largest exporter of the world. What happens next would definitely be important to the future of their trade relationship. Do you think China will fight back against Russia, and how serious will the consequences be for their financial landscape? Leave your thoughts in the comments and be sure to like and subscribe for more interesting videos.